Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Rogue Eye Entertainment podcast. My name is Schlerf, and we have a packed show today going over my review for two of at least my most anticipated projects of the month of June as we transition to the month of July. And I'm sure it was the same for a lot of other people as well. So, my review of The Bear season 3, which I just watched, finished a couple days ago, and then A Quiet Place Day 1, which I watched on Saturday. So, two very anticipated projects in June. Gonna go over those two, and if you have any time left, I'll talk about the most recent episode of The Boys, but I don't think we're gonna have time for that. So let's just get right into it. So The Bear season 3. So just to give some context, I watched the first two seasons of The Bear. Had to be almost, I think it was around late 2023, like December, right before New Year's. I binged the entire show. I loved it. I thought the first two seasons were amazing. The first season I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The second season I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. And again, this was, I mean, probably top three, top five most anticipated projects for me this entire year in film and TV. So I had not only high expectations, but also I was ready to jump right into this right when it came out. I mean, it came out on I think Wednesday at like 9 p.m. at least Eastern time. That's the time zone that I'm on, and I did a full sprint through it, and I finished it on Friday. So I finished it in 2 days, and I think it was 10 episodes. So it wasn't easy to binge in 2 days, but I love the show so much that I wanted to finish it. I wanted to finish it before this episode was recorded, so I could talk about it for you guys. So yeah, again, love the first two seasons of The Bear, but when there's a show like this where it's not my top 10 all time or anything, and maybe I'll get there at some point, but when there's a show like this where I enjoyed it so much, especially the previous season and the way it ended, I thought the finale was perfect. I hate to do it, but I just have to be honest when I think the quality has dropped. And just to be totally honest, I thought The Bear season 3 was a bit of a step down from the previous two seasons. I thought it was relatively disappointing. And that's just my overall. I can get into more specifics in a second, but I just watching it, my number one thought throughout, but also once I finished the finale, was nothing really happened this season. And I know that's like a broad generalization, like people kind of use in this industry sometimes to describe, movies, TV shows, whatever. And I just try to stray away from that generalization because I think it's unfair sometimes. But in this case, it just not a lot happens. The way I described it is like a transition season because there's stuff is happening. There's a lot of fallout from the previous finale, like I said, and then there's the whole storyline with Sugar having her baby, and there's the Marcus dealing with the loss of his mom, and there's Richie and Carmi having their falling out and dealing how that or showing how that develops throughout the entire season. It's Carmen dealing with his stress and trying to do these non-negotiables and all that stuff. And by the way, I'm gonna try to stray away a little bit from spoilers, but I will note when I am doing spoilers. But all that stuff, it's happening, but it's not cohesive at all. It's not as interesting as the previous seasons. And I think that they're relying a little too much on their stellar cast, to be honest. And I heard people say this in other reviews that I was reading in preparation for this episode, just to see what the public thinks about it. And I think that, excuse me, I think that the public and like the fan base is more on the side of liking it to not liking it. And the thing is, that's what I have to say is that I did not like the season. There were very good moments. There were very good episodes. There's a couple episodes in the middle that are very very good. I gave episode 5 stars in this season, but that doesn't mean that the season overall was a success because I don't think it was. Because again, the point I'm making about the stellar cast and then I love this entire cast. I think I mean everyone in the show, but all the main actors. I mean Jeremy Allen White, Iowa Debris, Ebon Moss-Bachrach, all those are like the main three. They're fantastic. Abby Elliott as Sugar, Lionel Boyce as Marcus. All these guys, they're amazing, amazing cast. And I mean the guest stars, Jamie Lee Curtis comes in for a whole episode again, and which was very much appreciated. But I'll get into that in a second. But I think that there's too much of them just saying, let's throw these guys into a scene and let's have them banter off each other, which is enjoyable, but nothing really happens the entire season. There's no, the first season, there was, all right, there's this chef that's coming in, his brother just died. He's trying to change the way this restaurant operates, this, place that's a completely stressed environment. He's trying to change the way it's made to actually make it a, great restaurant because that's what he promised Michael not right before he died, but a long time before he died. And then season two is all right. We want to reshape the entire restaurant. We're going to knock it all down, rebuild it, and make it a fine dining experience while still keeping the same, I guess, novelty or specialty that the previous restaurant did with the bear or the beef and now the bear. So those two seasons that have very, and also there was other stuff going on. There was flashback episodes, there was flashbacks to Michael, there's flashbacks to the family dinner, all that stuff. That stuff was all happening, but there was still a cohesive storyline throughout in both season 1 and season 2. It was very clear what the storyline was. And like that's why I would ask someone who says they enjoyed the season, they don't agree with what I'm saying, is what was the storyline? I mean, the beginning of the season is a lot of just fallout from the finale, which is another problem. I mean, it took, you know, 3, even 4 episodes to deal with the fallout of the finale, which is just way too much. That whole thing could have been 1 episode. Those 3 episodes could have been 1 episode, just shortened. But and then I guess they're dealing with like they hear about the review or Carmi is the non-negotiables that kind of comes in those first 3 episodes too, and that's kind of throughout the season. And then I talk about Richie and Carmi's beef, and no pun intended. And then there's the thing about the review coming in, and then there's Sydney getting the offer from the all right. Spoiler right here, Sydney getting the offer about maybe leaving the restaurant, and then they hear about the other restaurant closing. Like stuff is happening, here and there, and like there's kind of a theme throughout, but it's like nothing is really connecting, and it's not connecting or hitting on a level or the quality of the previous 2 seasons. It just isn't to me. I don't see. I just personally did not enjoy the story and just the way the season was built from the beginning to the end. And I thought the finale was weak. I thought, and like I said, there's really good episodes in here. I mean, the ones that stand out the most to me are episode 6, no, episode 5, I think. I don't want to mess this up, so let me just real quick. Episode 5, which is right before my favorite episode of the season, episode 6. Episode 5, I just like the banter back and forth. There was a cameo in it, which again, not going to spoil, but spoiler alert, John Cena has a cameo in it, which is hilarious. And that episode was great, and that episode felt like, all right, we're actually like getting somewhere. We're like the person who's doing the review is coming in, we're preparing the restaurant, and there's a whole cohesive story. We're still getting the banter between people, and we're still getting the stuff that's still coming from the fallout of the previous season. But there's actually something going on in the episode. Like something is clearly happening. We know what's happening, and it's playing off the banter between the characters, and that's what I really enjoyed. And the next episode, which this is the reason, like you probably think, well, if you gave an episode 5 stars, and that one's the one I just said, I gave 4.5 stars out of 5, and then this one I gave 5 stars on episode 6. And if you're probably like, well, if you're giving episodes these high ratings, how is it only? Well, I haven't even said my rating yet, but I gave this 3 out of 5 stars this season. You're probably saying, well, how is it 3 out of 5 stars? I mean, you're giving a lot of episodes 4 stars, a lot of 4.5, 5. Maybe there's a couple bad ones in there, but none of my episode ratings go below 3 stars. And again, if you want to see specifically what I set up in every episode, my serialized link is in the description, and you can check it out there. But it's just not the time to go into every episode here. But anyway, um, well, the episode 6, fair enough, but episode 5, fair enough. But episode 6 is a flashback episode, and I think Iowa Debris did a fantastic job directing it. And I mean, it was her directorial debut, and I mean, it was fantastic. It was an episode focused on Tina. It was all took place in the past, but I thought it was beautifully shot, beautiful. Character focused episodes are like what make this show amazing, and we saw that with the Richie episode last. My favorite episode in the whole show is the Richie episode last season, Forks. I don't know what number it is, but it's called Forks, and they did the same thing here with Tina, and it was great, and I loved it. And again, Iowa Debris' direction was great. The final scene between her and Michael was amazing. But that's a flashback episode, so that's like that literally has no correlation to the rest of the season whatsoever. And that could also be seen as a problem too. Maybe that's a reason where I shouldn't rate it as high as 5 stars, because the Richie episode last season, like that was clearly connected to the storyline, because they were all getting tired of Richie at the bear. So Carmi sent him to this restaurant to get rid of him and basically try to get him to fail. And I mean, Carmi didn't admit that, but it was clear that was the case. He wanted to get rid of him, wanted to see him just clean forks for a week at the famous restaurant in the city. And then that directly leads into the final 2 episodes where Richie changes his ways and he finds his purpose. I could talk about the episode forever, but I'm just using an example. Whereas the Tina episode, there's no connection to the rest of the season. And again, this is like a big nitpick because I love that episode, but I'm just saying, like, it's just an example to show how there can be good episodes in the season and there are good episodes in the season. Like the first episode is a great example too. The first episode is super polarizing. There's like not a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of flashback. A lot of people have been saying that even though it's good, it has no like it means nothing. Like you could skip that episode or maybe watch 1 minute of Carmi and Sydney talking and skip that episode, and then you would be fine for the rest of the season. And I totally understand that. But I liked that episode because that was a creative swing. I thought it was a creative way to open the season. And again, the way it's shot is beautiful. The music is absolutely amazing. The music is beautiful. Together by Nine Inch Nails, beautiful music choice. And just seeing like it's kind of like a look into Carmi's like mental state, I guess. And I thought that was super interesting. But again, it's an example of an episode in the season, and there's at least like two or three of these where it might be good, but nothing is happening before the plot of these characters. And again, that's why I say, even though it's a generalization, that nothing really happened this season because look at where we started at the beginning of the season and then the end, and there's not much changes. And um, I another thing I said in my review was that my serialized review is that a lot of good shows have a transition season, and usually it comes toward the end of the show. Compared, I mean, I don't know how many seasons it's going to be, but they're already renewed for season four. But usually it comes toward the end of the show and not in the third, fourth season. But every good show has this, and maybe this season is going to be something that we look back on after watching season 4 and 5 or however many they do, but specifically season four. And we're like, all right, well, a lot of that was set up for this and there's good content in there. So, it's not great, but it's probably the worst season, but it's still good. My favorite show of all time, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., if you've watched that show, season 6 is an incredibly, it's all set up for the seventh season. Like there's good moments in there, but it's all set up for the seventh season. But again, transition seasons can still be good. And I think in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's still a 4 to 5 season, 4 to 5 star season. Whereas this, again, I said it's only a 3 out of 5 star because there's literally nothing but and it's not even set up really. It's not like it's totally setting up next season, but aside from the only two things that I can think off the top of my head are setting up the next season, maybe three. The first thing would be, is Sydney going to take the offer to leave the restaurant? And we don't have no idea what's happening with that. And then number two is the review, which we literally is like the final scene of the finale. And again, I'm getting into spoilers a little bit here, but I'm sure if you're listening at this point, you probably have already seen it. And number three is like the whole Richie and Tiff and Frank thing. I don't think that's really going to factor in, maybe, but that's another thing that I thought that maybe will be set up for the next season. But by the way, sidebar, they need to get Jillian Jacobs as Tiff a lot more. They really need to find a way to get her in the show a lot more in the future because I know she's a bit separated because like Richie and her are kind of on whatever terms they see each other every once in a while for his daughter, but that's like about it. But their chemistry is so good. I love. There was a scene in, I believe it was the penultimate episode of the season where they have like a 5 minute conversation on a park bench, and I just love their chemistry. It sucks that they're not together because I think they have great chemistry, but we'll probably learn more about that breakup in the future. And I hope we do. But that's just a sidebar. But again, those are the only really three things I can think of at the top of my head. Whereas when you ended season one, you ended season two, there was 15 things you were thinking of like, oh my god, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. And whenever season four does come out or whenever it's teased, I'll be excited for it. But there's absolutely no chance I'll be as excited as I was for the previous two seasons and going into this season too, because there's just not that much setup. I mean, it's gonna be like an interesting. I guess the storyline that I'm seeing from the next season, just in my head, is that it's gonna be like a can they keep the restaurant afloat, which I guess kind of was this season's premise. Like I guess you could argue that, but it's kind of iffy. And but with the review coming in, which seems like it's gonna be bad because Cicero was calling him and Computer was calling him, and I can't believe there's a character named Computer, but that's beside the point. And then there's is Sydney gonna leave? And without Sydney, can the restaurant be successful at a high level like Carmi wants it to be? And there's like the Richie and Carmi are still beefing. Is that going to be a problem? Carmi has like some serious mental health problems. Is that going to become a problem? Like that's what I think the next storyline, the next season will be. And that's probably what they were going for with this season because there's scenes where Cicero is mad about money, Sugar's counting the money, Computer's like dialing the numbers or whatever, and Sydney's considering leaving because all this mess and all the money they're losing and stuff like that. I guess like that's what they were trying to do this season, but I don't think it works in a way that I don't think it was executed in a way that makes this season successful. So, like I said, I still enjoyed this season. Like I'm not saying the season was bad, and it's pretty telling that all the stuff I'm saying about it is like relatively negative, and it's still 3 out of 5 stars, 6 out of 10, because again, really the main reason is because the acting in the show and the cast of the show is so unbelievably good. I mean, all of these act like the main like 10 actors in the show. I would be shocked if they didn't get an immense amount of roles in television and movies in the future. I know a lot of them are already successful in their own right, but a lot of these characters, a lot of these actors are relatively lesser known. Like none of them are really A-listers besides some of the cameos and stuff. But I know a couple of them. I knew a couple of them going into this, but a lot of them, this is my first time watching them. I mean, especially we've already seen with Mas Bachrach has already gotten a role in the Fantastic Four, which is going to be like Marvel's all chips in. We want this to be amazing, and everyone's going to enjoy it. So that's already shown there. Io Debre's been cast in movies. Jeremy Allen White was in a movie at the end of last year, The Iron Claw, and I think he's already being cast in. It was like a musical biopic or something. Apologies if I don't remember who it was, but I'm saying that that's what makes this season. And again, I heard someone describe it as like they rely on the cast too much. They just throw them in scenes and hope it'll become gripping and entertaining. And it does at points, but at other points, the pacing just completely messed up because of that one fact. So again, those are the positives. I mean, the positives with the cast are amazing. There's some really good episodes in there. It's always shot beautifully. And again, the direction of those certain episodes that I really liked are really good. I also didn't mention this, but I relatively enjoyed, not relatively, but I think I really enjoyed the episode with Sugar having her baby. And I mean, the episode is literally like 40, or it's like 35, 40 minutes of two people in a room where a couple people come in occasionally, but like two people in a room, which is what's her name? What's the act? Abby Elliott, who plays Sugar, and Jamie Lee Curtis, who plays her mom, Donna, and they're in a room together for like 35 minutes. They're just acting, like they're just acting. And apparently, it was only two takes, which is crazy. But they're just acting a scene out, and they're having great chemistry, and they're sorting out, character development, and it's all happening while she's like having contractions about to have a baby. So, and then Pete comes in, and then she has her moment at the end of the episode. But so the fact that they were able to make that episode gripping as it was with how slow it was and how it's literally two people acting in one scene and apparently it was only two takes, that's impressive. So there are very big highs in this season, but again, I just keep coming to back to the fact that there's just no cohesion this season. There's no one broad storyline we're following, and yeah. I, with the high expectations I had going into the season, with all the promo and stuff, and the way the season ended, and how good the previous two seasons were, I was just left. Excuse me, I was just left disappointed, just to be honest. And I have to be honest with you, shows. Part of me was thinking, there's great stuff in here, and maybe it's not as cohesive, but it's still really good. So I'll just give it a 4.5 or 4 out of 5 stars and just leave it at that. And I'll talk about it here. But I have to be honest, I just didn't enjoy this season as much as the previous two. And like the penultimate episode that I was watching, and I was watching the finale, I just wasn't like totally into it compared to the previous two seasons, any of the episodes in the previous two seasons. And that was sad. Like I wish I was much more into it. And again, I know there's a lot of people out there that really like this season, and you're welcome to form your opinion. I'm not saying this is fact or anything, but just for me, it just didn't totally work for me, just to be honest. And again, it's still good. Still going to be excited for season 4 whenever it comes out. There's rumors they film them back to back, so maybe soon, but I don't know if that's true or not. But knowing them, it'll be out by either end of this year or early next year, which should be good. And good for them getting out seasons quick with how many Invincibles we have nowadays. But yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else like broad or maybe specific thoughts. Um, oh yeah, the finale again. I didn't think it was that great. I thought it just didn't. There was no setup for it. It kind of just happened, and there's occasional good scenes in it. But the ending I thought was amazing. Which the ending I mean is that Iowa Debris, and I think she was the best character this season. She's an amazing actor, and at the end of the season, she has again spoiler, but she has like a panic attack or anxiety attack right at the end of the season, and the way it's acted is genuinely like unbelievable. I mean, it's a apparently we're getting a lot of realistic depictions of panic attacks in media this month because Inside Out 2 was the same thing. But the way she acts it is like genuinely like it's like gives me chills thinking about how like accurate it is and how someone could literally act that out without it actually happening. So kudos to her. She's amazing. And again, the whole cast is amazing. The last thing I'm gonna say, then we'll move on to the A Quiet Place. But last thing I'm gonna say is that the Claire stuff, it's just not working. I was not on the majority of the fan base of this show was not really happy with how Claire came in, and there's a lot of people that like shipping Sydney and Carmy, which I'd never really got. Aside from the fact that like they'd be fine together, but there's no setup for it, and just because the two actors are amazing, and they've good chemistry. But the Claire stuff I thought was cool last season. I thought it worked, and I thought the way it ended was sad and it was emotional, all that stuff. But the way they have to commit to it or get rid of it because they can't keep having like these flashes of her every 2 episodes and he thinks about her and he's like, oh, maybe I should call her, and then he doesn't the entire season. Like it just comes and goes and nothing really happens with it. Like nothing happens. It's just, I mean, there's kind of like that ending where the facts go to the hospital, but then it just goes away, and like maybe that'll be proven maybe that'll be pushed more in the next season, and maybe again this is more of the transition season argument, but it just isn't working for me anymore. And maybe they'll be able to make it in a way that was as successful and good storytelling as the previous season. But right now, the Claire stuff is not working. So please either get rid of that or figure it out better. So again, I'll be locked in and I'll be watching when the next season comes out, and I hope it comes out soon. I love the cast. I still overall like this season, but with the high expectations, with how good the previous two seasons are, this season just turns out it's a bit of a mess and a bit of a disappointment. So, yeah, I don't think I have any other thoughts about that. I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts about this once you finish watching it. I know it's only been out for less than a week, but just disappointing to me. And I hope everyone enjoyed it. And again, love the cast. Can't wait for the next season. So that's my review of the Bears season three. Gonna take our one and only break of this episode. Then we're gonna get into my review of A Quiet Place Day One, and also I watched the previous two, A Quiet Place Part One and Part Two, over the past week. So maybe I'll give my quick thoughts on that as well to give context for Day One. But again, so A Quiet Place Day One. Gonna review that after the break. All right, so we are back to talk about A Quiet Place Day One. Real quick before I get into my review, I'm just talking about as I try to do with all these new movies that I watched, the general theater experience. So, well, first off, I am very happy about this because the Deadpool Wolverine promo is clearly starting because I got this popcorn bucket. This is not like something I bought. This was just the popcorn bucket they were giving to everyone. Look at that. We got two characters promo right there. So I kept this because I think it was cool. And honestly, it's like the first moment that this movie feels real. As a huge comic book fan of Deadpool and Wolverine for my entire life, huge fan of Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, huge fan of Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool, his two movies. Fact that this is real and this is happening in less than a month is surreal, and I can't wait to see it and talk about it with you guys. But anyway, that was a good start to the theater experience. But I think with these Quiet Place movies is that I didn't see, like I just said, I didn't before the break, I didn't see the first two movies in theaters. I don't remember why. I just didn't. I don't really like horror movies usually, and I've learned that these aren't really horror as much as tension, but especially the most recent one that I just saw. But still, I just didn't watch them at the time, and I've realized now that everyone was talking about how, you're trying to stay quiet to like not eat your popcorn because the entire movie is mostly quiet. And that is 100% true. That's how we experienced in my theater, at least. Again, I saw it on Saturday. So packed theater because it was the second day that it was open, or technically third day, but Friday it opened. Saturday I went and saw it. 1 p.m. screening. So a lot of people were there. And thing about it is that at least my theater was not worried at all about making noise when it was quiet because a lot of people were coughing, sipping their cups, eating popcorn. And I was kind of doing the same thing, to be honest. And it is what it is. But there was points where I was like trying to eat popcorn and like it's completely silent, and I'm like, well, I feel like a you know what if I eat my popcorn right now. So that was funny, kind of a funny theater experience in that sense, but nothing special. Again, pretty good theater, but it's not one of those movies where like Inside Out or Bad Boys, where it's Bad Boys, there's a lot of laughter in the theater. Inside Out, there's a lot of crying. Again, the whole movie's quiet, so you're not experiencing really anything in the theater because that's the whole point of the movie. So again, decent theater experience, but nothing special. So to get in my review, I definitely enjoyed this movie. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, 7 out of 10, whatever you want to call it. And I think it absolutely has its issues, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But it also has a lot of big positives, and is clearly a genuinely good installment in this franchise, I guess. And that is as positive a thing as we can get because obviously it's been 4 years since the last movie came out, and the last two movies were so successful. I mean, the second one was a lot less well critically received. I don't even know if that makes sense, but a lot worsely received. What am I trying to say? A lot less critically received. Like it wasn't as received as positively as the first movie. It got there in the end, and even then, people were very excited for whatever the next movie in this franchise would be. But I know there was a lot of concern also where they hear that this new movie, Day One, is again being a prequel and it's focusing on completely different characters. There's, I mean, literally little to none, no connections to the previous characters. There's one character that returns to the previous trilogy. I'll get into that in a second. But um, I know there was concerns about this movie, and I didn't really have any thoughts in this movie. I saw the trailer, and I thought it looked good, so that's why I wanted to come see this and make sure I watched the first two before it came out. But I really didn't even need to do that because it's a prequel. But anyway, it made sense for more context. But just with all things considered, with all the concerns there could be with having a new cast, having a new setting, having it be on day one, and deal with the fallout of that, I think it was as good as it could have been. And again, it's not without issues, and there's not without stuff that I didn't agree with what they did. But the bottom line is that after watching this, number one, I enjoyed the movie a lot, and number two, I would love to see more movies in this franchise, whether it's continuation of the previous trilogy, whether it's a new story with new characters, whether it's a story followed by these characters, which I don't think will happen considering how it ended, but maybe. And you know, that is a good thing for this franchise and just in general the movies this month because you know it wasn't this cash grab reboot that focused on these characters that nobody cares about and the setting was different and it felt weird. It didn't feel like that at all. There is problems, but it didn't feel like that at all. So the positives, I guess, I should get into the positives first. The positives are number one, the cast is fantastic. I love Lupita and Nyong'o. I've liked her for a long time now because again, like I said, I don't really like horror movies. I rarely watch horror movies, but the way she does horror is amazing. I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you might know her more from the Black Panther movies, but I absolutely, I mean, it's mostly Jordan Peele. Just he's a magician. The fact that he can make me enjoy horror, but she's part of it too because Us and Get Out are both amazing. Us is the one where she's leading role. I don't know why I'm talking about Peele specifically, but talking about her, Us, where she's the lead role, she's I mean unbelievable in it and is anchoring the entire movie. And I think she's great in that. And her performance is so good that it drew me into watching that movie. But and with A Quiet Place, day one, not as creepy horror as Us, but still she puts in a fantastic performance with emotion, with not depression, I guess, sadness, fear, loathing, all this stuff. She puts in all the emotions, great performance, and then the entire cast is good, but also Joseph Quinn because they're the main two. Joseph Quinn, the only thing I've seen him in before is Stranger Things season 4, whatever the most recent season was. That's what I know him from, and he was just whatever in that show. I mean, I don't think he put on any great acting performance in that show. I just thought it was whatever, but I like this character, but it wasn't anything that showed me he could be a movie star. But this movie does, and it makes me again very excited for Fantastic Four. I mean, we're talking about two actors that are in Fantastic Four. I've already said this is my most anticipated movie like ever, and Fantastic Four my favorite team in the comics. Reed Richards, my favorite character, whatever. But my point is that this movie has made it clear that Joseph Quinn can be a movie star. He can show a lot of emotions. He can show a lot of happiness, sadness. I mean, all the main things that you want to see in an actor's big, not big screen debut, but big kind of breakout project. I would say this is it for him. Big movie breakout project. Not obviously Stranger Things was his TV breakout in general breakout, but what I'm saying is that he's proven that he can be cast in big franchises in the future, and he's already starring in Gladiator 2 later this year. But and then Fantastic Four next year. He's proven that he will be able to he will be able to fit in with the amazing cast that is alongside him in those two big franchises and whatever franchises he's cast in the future. So apology for the long-winded thing, but that's the point I'm trying to get at. So again, cast is fantastic. It's really only those two are in the movie from the majority of it. Like I said, there's characters that return from the previous trilogy, and I feel bad because I love this actor, but I don't totally know how to pronounce his name. It's Dijman Honsu, I think. I'm not totally sure how to pronounce it, but he's a great actor. I love him in a couple other things too, and he had a minor role in part two, and he has a minor role in this one too. But it's cool. There's like a little bit of connection, which is gonna get to some of the negatives, but it's cool. There's a little bit of connection there. As expected with this franchise, it's shot beautifully, and the way they use sound mixing is beautiful, and I think the way they throw it, that's just speaks for itself. Don't really need to go much more about that. But then also the way they throw it into NYC. I'm reading off my review, which is why that's weird, but the way they throw it into the city of New York and the city that is literally, at least in America, the most loud city in the world, the most hectic city in the world, the most stressed people in the entire world, and the fact that we throw in this concept into that city is really interesting. And in fact, I think they could have honestly leaned into it a little bit more. And again, get to that when I get to the negatives, but that's a big positive is throwing it into this environment, especially when the monsters first come down in the beginning of this movie, like about 15, 20 minutes in. It's really interesting concept, the way everyone reacts to it, the way the city bands together at points, the way they separate at points, the way some people go crazy at points. That stuff is all really interesting. And I think putting this situation or this franchise into that city could have been a complete flop, but I think they did it pretty well, all things considered. And I guess my final positive would be that and besides from the fact what I said earlier is that this movie was very good and I would watch more films in the franchise, is that the final 10 to 15 minutes of this movie. And I guess that's, yeah, final 10 to 15 minutes of this movie. And again, I don't really want to go into too many spoilers here, but the final 10 to 15 minutes of this movie is, and if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, is super tense. It's up there for the most tense moments in this entire franchise from the previous two. And there's so many tense moments in those movies, but it's super tense. It has an emotional backbone. It has you on the edge of their seat, it had you trying to stay quiet, all that stuff. And the music in that scene is good. The acting in that scene, specifically Joseph Quinn, but also in Youngo as well, is just amazing. And that was probably my favorite part of the whole movie is those last 10 to 15 minutes. If it isn't, when they first landed in New York, it's that. And yeah, just in general, I mean, like I said, it is a worthy installment into a franchise that is very popular and a movie in the first one that I really enjoyed. And that's the important thing is that like I didn't really go into what I thought about the first two because we just don't have time for that. But the first one I thought was very, very good. I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. And the second one I thought was a bit of a step down, but still enjoyable. And this one, I think day one is actually better than part two. This is probably the second one. Then Quiet Place One is clearly number one. This is clearly number two, and the last one is or the second one is clearly number three. But um, to get into a little bit of the reason I don't think this gets any higher than a 7 out of 10, 3.5 out of 5 stars. Number one is that I think, and I talked about the emotional backbone at the end. I think it's good in that moment, but I think this movie struggles at points to find out what it actually wants to be. And what I mean by that is, and this will make so much more sense if you watch the movie. So go see this movie. It's really good. Go see it. But it struggles to decide between whether it's going to be more about the characters and the emotion, or more about the tension and drama like the previous two and the action of the previous two, or a story about life. Like that's either a story about life and characters or tension, action, crazy stuff like that. And that kind of messes up the pacing at points because sometimes it feels like they're just throwing us into like it feels like they're just throwing us into an action sequence at some point just for an action sequence. And they're amazing. I mean, they're well choreographed, good CGI is good, tense. The monsters are great. I still love how they look, and I love their everything about them and everything about the way they are designed and their attributes and all that stuff. But I think it really messes up the pacing at points because we're trying to have an emotional moment and we're trying to learn more about these characters and learn more of their backstory. And then like randomly we're going like, oh, now they're running away from monsters and where are they going? We have no idea. And then, oh wait, what about that thing we learned about that character 5 minutes ago? It just feels like a bit choppy at points, I guess. Choppy, I think, is the best way to describe it. And it's not too off-putting, which is why I still really like this movie, but it could have been a lot worse. But I think that if they addressed that better or they executed that better and they focused to me, I think it would have been better if they focused more on the emotional side of the characters, even though I love the tense chase sequences and stuff. But I think if they focus more on that emotional side of the characters, and Yogo and Quinn's characters, then this movie could have been really good. Like I think it could have been a 4 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5, one of the best movies I've seen this year, and up there with Furiosa, Challengers, Dune, those movies that came out this year. Um, but without that, and with where they can't really decide what they're going for, and I think in theory they were going for more of the emotional side because although the first two movies are very emotional because it's more about family, this is more about just what's the best way to describe it? Because they're just throwing us into these two characters that didn't know each other before, compared to John Krasinski, Emily Blunt having a family. That's different. Whereas in this one, it's Inigo and Quinn meeting each other for the first time and finding that connection, which I think is so interesting. And the fact that you're able to give you a serious, emotional dynamic when it's this scenario and not like it's not the first two movies where it's day 400 or whatever. It's day one or day two and day three. I think day three is when the movie ends. But it's like the first couple of days of the entire invasion or whatever, and they should be panicked. They should be freaking out. But there's something you learn about Anyogo's character that explains why she doesn't, and then Quinn's character kind of latches onto her to try to feel the way she does. But the way that they're able to still have like a story about those two characters and make it make sense, especially there's a scene at the end where again, no spoilers, but they go into a like what's the best? They go into like a pizza parlor, and there's a very cool moment there. And if you've seen the movie again, you'll know what I'm talking about. But that's my main complaint about this movie is that I think the emotional parts are good. I think the action parts are good, but they just don't blend it in a way that makes it totally good throughout the entire way. It makes it a little too choppy at points. So that's really my main concern about this. And kind of in that same vein, I would say that I wish that the characters, specifically the two main characters, their their character depth or their qualities, their character, or stuff about the character was fleshed out in more depth and earlier in the movie because especially later in the movie in that scene I was just talking about, a lot of specifically in Yogo's character, her emotion and her drive and the reason she is the way she is explained in that scene. But that's with like 25 minutes left in the movie. At least just that was I wasn't looking at a clock or anything, but that's just what I was thinking. And so I think it was. And I wish that was explained a lot more in the beginnings. There's like 10 minutes to open the movie where the aliens haven't come yet. We're kind of just are meeting a couple characters. And I wish in that point we had learned a lot more about Yogo's character. And you can kind of discern maybe what's going on from the beginning, but I wish we learned a lot more from her character in the beginning and also Quinn's character. We don't really learn a lot about Quinn's character at all, to be honest. I mean, we know a couple little details and like the reason he's here and the reason he this, but we don't really know anything about his character. And maybe we didn't need to because maybe it was a lot more focused on Yogo's character, which I think is fine. But again, this is just my complaint is that I think it would have been a lot better if their character development, specifically Quinn's, was developed more, but and Yogo's was just developed earlier and was explained earlier in the movie, which would have made the tense scenes in the beginning when the first invasion first comes, it would have made them more valuable and made them more emotional and I would have been hooked more on them. I think that's the best way to put it. And those are my main two complaints. I'm just trying to think. The other thing, and this I'm not don't even count this as a complaint. I'm just saying it as an overall thought, which I've heard a couple people say this when they've been reviewing the movie recently, especially big fans of the previous two and the whole concept of the previous two and like the lore and stuff, is that and I expected this as well, is that a lot of people expected there to be a little bit of more knowledge on like how the origin of the monsters, how they came, is there different types of monsters, and they do incorporate certain aspects in the previous two movies, like the fact they can't swim, and obviously the main concept of them is the fact they're blind and all that stuff. And there's like a I guess a tiny little thing they introduced that wasn't in the previous two movies, but like it's really the same monsters and the same concept with the monsters and the way they act as the previous two movies, which I was like somewhat disappointed in. I don't think I was as much as other people, but it's just a tiny critique is that I wish that they would explain like a little bit more about them. I'm not saying we have to have like a scene in space where like they're on this alien planet, and, like that would feel off. Like I get it that the point of this franchise, and John Krasinski would tell you this probably, is that the point of this franchise was never to make it about the aliens. The aliens are there and they're the main antagonists of the story, but it was never about why are they here, where do they come from. It was more a story about life. Like I said, a story about life in the first two, and they try to do it in this third one as well, or this prequel as well, day one. But I think that it would have been nice to get a little bit more about the aliens. Like they're really just the same. We don't really learn anything new about them. Besides some again, some tiny little thing that I'm not going to spoil, but most people probably wouldn't even notice it. At least I barely noticed it until I watched a review and heard someone talk about it. But again, that's a small critique. But the main two are the two that I just said is that number one, can't figure out what movie it wants to be at points. And number two is that the character's depth and emotion wasn't really fleshed out as much as it should have been, I think. Because the previous two, the part one and part two, they're not really fleshed out either. I mean, you don't really learn much about the Krasinski, Emily Blunt, Simmons, who plays the daughter. What's her name? What's the actor's name? Anyway, the daughter, the son, the younger son that dies early on, we don't really learn anything about them besides from the flashback sequence in part two, which I think is one of the best scenes, maybe the best scene in the whole franchise. But it's just at least the way it's shot and the way it's set up. But and day one follows a lot of that, and it does a lot of good job following that scene. I think it doesn't not out of place compared to that. But anyway, what I'm saying is that we don't learn about a lot about the previous family that we followed in the first two parts. We didn't learn a lot about that family, but besides some just general stuff. But that was easier to develop the movie and make it successful for. Whereas this one, like I said, it's really trying to give you an emotional connection to these characters, specifically the main two characters, and it struggles to do that because they don't develop them enough. And that's why that goes back to the main point about it doesn't know what movie it's going to be at some points and it feels choppy. So yeah, my overall thoughts on this movie are that I really enjoyed it, and this is a movie I really want to emphasize this, and I don't think I need to because this movie is doing well at the box office already, and I think it will continue to be, and it'll go way over budget like the previous two movies, or way over budget like the way over profit, and I think that's going to happen regardless. But I think it's really important to emphasize that this movie. Go see it on a big screen. Do not wait for this to hit streaming. Do not wait for this to hit streaming, then watch the previous three all together. Like, no, I really regret the fact that I didn't get to see the first one specifically, but also the second one in theaters before. I really wish I could go back in time and make myself watch it because having that experience in theaters would have been amazing. But anyway, this one, day one, is like the first two. If you like the theater experience of the first two, then go see this one in the theater. Go see on the biggest screen possible with the probably by yourself, so you don't bother by other people. But go see it in the biggest screen possible before it gets out of theaters. It'll be in there for a while, I'm sure. But and again, it's doing well at the box office anyway, so maybe I don't even need to tell you this. But yeah, go see this movie in the theaters because it is not something that you want to pirate or go on streaming or whatever. It's really something that needs to be experienced in on a big screen. I don't think I'm going to be the only one to say that, but again, it's just obvious and it's something that I thought with the I guess declining popularity of theaters this year and a lot of good movies have flopped. And I said this about Furiosa, and I wish I had this podcast then because I could have pushed it more, but um with like that was the thing with Furiosa that it didn't do well in the box office, but it was really amazing. It's the best movie I've seen this year and one of the best movies I've seen this decade so far. So anyway, really enjoyed Quiet Place Day One. Hope we get more movies or whatever, more projects in this universe. And whether it's with these characters, whether it's with the previous, I think A Quiet Place Part 3 is already greenlit, and I think it's going to come out either next year or the year after. I don't think we have any updates on that, but just reading up about this movie in preparation for this episode, I've heard that it's in development. So we'll see what happens with that, and we'll see if it follows the previous family and maybe connects to this at all. I don't know, but I'm interested. That's all I'll say. I'm intrigued to see what they come up with again in this franchise, and it hasn't got old yet. The concept has not got old yet, and that's the most important thing. So hopefully it expands on the previous story, expands on these characters, or gives us more origin about the monsters, or gives us more of a humans, the humans having headway against the monsters for the first time. Not the first time. We kind of saw it at the end of part two. But anyway, I'm rambling on. This is a good movie. Go see it. Let me real quick. I can't remember fully, but let me show you. Not show you. Let me tell you where it ranks on my 2024 movie so far. So this movie slots in, and this sounds low, but there's just a lot of good movies I've seen so far this year. At number 9, out of all the 2024 movies I've seen, the new releases, out of 17 of them, and I'll just go through real quick what's above it. Godzilla times Kong, Bad Boys Ride or Die, Fall Guy, Inside Out 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Dune Part 2, Challengers, and Furiosa in that order from lowest to highest rated. And thing is, though, it's still really good. Like it being number 9 is not meaning that it's not a quality movie and doesn't fit with some of the better movies in this year. It's very close to all those movies that are above it. Godzilla times Kong, Bad Boys, Fall Guy, Inside Out. It's close to all those, but maybe not Inside Out, but those previous three I just named. But just that big problem with it where it feels a bit choppy with the pacing. That's really what puts it down. Doesn't bring it up to a 4.5 stars. So again, very good installment of this franchise. I really enjoyed it. Go see this movie. So that's it for this episode. That was my review of The Bear season 3 and then A Quiet Place Day 1. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for tuning into this episode and all the previous episodes, all the Rogue Guy Sports episodes, and all of that, keeping up with the social media and stuff. I hope you'll be enjoying the clips that I've been posting because it takes a lot of effort to get a lot of clips, post clips every day or almost every day. So hope people are enjoying it. I have seen support on them, so I know people are. And yeah, not sure what we're gonna have in store. I guess I said I might talk about the boys episode 5, but I just don't have time. So not sure what we're gonna have in store for next week, but I will figure it out and we'll have a great episode again next week. Every Monday, remember, be here, Spotify, YouTube. All the links are in the description for the website, social media, all that stuff. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for all the support on Rogue Eye Media. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.